Hi everybody, and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm so excited to start this journey around the world in 80 days with you all, and I'm actually starting a day early. I'm going to mix up the first part of our recipe. This is Tuesday night, and so I'm going to mix this up tonight and finish off the recipe tomorrow. I just wanted to take a couple moments and let you all see what the recipe will look like when you get ready to, when you find the recipe that you want to make, and if you want to print it off the web page, you have that capability. And so I want to get right into it and show you what the recipe is going to look like. So today we are doing, we're starting in America, because if we were going around the world in 80 days, we would take off from right here in the US of A. So we're going to do a delicious recipe from the United States of America portion of the A to Z, the World Food website, and we are doing apple dumplings, delicious apple dumplings, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they are delicious, because you never know when I cook something. So my full disclaimer is in full force here. I am not a chef. My daughter is an amazing pastry chef. I, not so much. So this is me just winging it. And like I said in the very first introductory video, even if you only tune in to see how much I mess something up, you'll be entertained at least. So I'm going to gonna flip my camera around here and let you see what the recipe looks like when we print it off from the web page, and we'll get right to it. So here is our recipe as it prints off from the web page, and you can see all of this information is on the web page as well. Everything that I'm showing you right here on this piece of paper is on the web page as well. I love the fact that it gives you how many servings it's going to serve, okay? And it gives you a little bit of history of apple dumplings and where they maybe originated from, which I think is very cool that we get that little bit of insight. And then I love the prep time information, the cook time, and then the total amount of time that it's going to take for you to make this recipe. So I really do look at that. Those of you who have ever heard me talk about cooking and food before know that I do not like to spend more time hands-on making something than it's going to take me to actually sit down and eat it. So I'm going to have to eat these apple dumplings really, really slow, 50 minutes, but I think they'll definitely be worth it. I've made a lot of pies before, but I have never made apple dumplings, so I am super excited about this. So you can see here the ingredients are listed, very easy to follow along. I like the fact that if you're new to cooking and you want to check off your ingredients as you put them in or as you gather them, that is a great way to do it. And then it gives you the directions. This one here has directions that actually do flip over onto the back side. There's 14 steps to this recipe, so we'll see. Maybe we could take bets on which one I'm gonna mess up on first. So I have all my ingredients to start the pastry right here. It calls for 1.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, 7 tablespoons of chilled butter, and 1/4 cup of water that is icy cold. You can see I have an ice cube sitting in there right now. Okay, so here goes. I have my bowl out. It's a rather, it's just a regular sized bowl here, nothing extra special about it. I have my ingredients. Some of them are measured out, some of them are not. My flour is just all-purpose flour. One of the things that I did say in our tutorial was I'm going to try my best to make sure that all the ingredients are things that you will readily have available just right there in your own home or in your own local grocery stores. So we're not going to get anything that's outrageous or difficult to find. So the recipe says to mix the flour and salt in a large bowl. So I might be able to get through this. So there's my teaspoon of salt. I learned somewhere once that whisking your flour is just as good as stirring it. So I'm going to whisk those two together. And just make sure that the salt is nicely incorporated. And then it says to add the butter. Rub and pinch the butter into the flour using your fingers. Lightly work together the butter and flour. Combine for a few short minutes until the butter is all coated in the flour and the mixture is chunky. So normally I would, if I were making a pastry, normally I would use a pastry blender or maybe even my food processor. But you know, we're doing this by the website. So there's my butter, and let's get to mixing. So we're going to get in here, and I'm just going to pinch it and rub it. Now I do know from talking with my daughter, who is a professional pastry chef, that working with your fingers is really the best way to blend pastry dough. And so I think it has something to do with maybe the heat of your hands, helping to do this a little bit better. So I'm going to try to reposition my camera and see if I can use both hands for the rest of this one. Okay, so I had to just switch where I was standing. So I'm going to continue with both hands now because it's so much easier two-handed here. I'm just pinching the butter and kind of working the flour into it as I go. And you know, I have to say, I've never done pastry with my fingers like this before. It feels kind of cool. If you have little ones at home that might enjoy helping out with a recipe, something like this, if you're not afraid of a little bit of flour mess in your home, something like this could be awfully fun for a younger child. So I am just mixing and mixing, and I still have some pretty big chunks in there. So today at the library, today is Tuesday again, I did put up our display for the United States and some travel information for the US of A. We are, you know, we're just not traveling much these days. We're not getting in our cars and we're not going anywhere. And it's just a different kind of season for everybody. But what I did pull out from our library shelves are some books on traveling. So maybe once the travel restrictions are lifted a little better, or the travel advisories are lifted, and we'll all have the opportunity to travel a bit more. There are some great books on national parks, in the United States. There's some great books on from Frommer's on travel in different regions of the United States. You know, maybe once this is all over, maybe you'll decide that you're going to take a nice trip somewhere with your family or by yourself or whatever you like. Maybe you're tired of your family and you just want to maybe you just need to want to travel and get away from them. I don't know. We will see. So our butter is, it's really starting to be kind of chunky here. You can see as I'm sifting through it, it's not real fine. I'm still a few short minutes until the butter is all coated in flour and the mixture is chunky. What do you think? Do you think we're there? I think we are. So the next step says to create a well in the center of the mixture and add the water. Again, quickly mix together with your hands. So I'm just going to create a small well in the center here. I have my icy cold water right here, but I only need 1/4 cup, and this is in a 1/3 cup. So I'm going to try to get rid of my ice cube without dumping it. And we're going to pour this in. And with my hands, I'm going to quickly mix this together. Now, I know that the water needs to be icy cold because we just warmed up the butter with our fingers, and now we want icy cold water to kind of bring that back together again. If any of you have ever had the pleasure of taking our Just a Crust classes with local resident Teresa Stryker at the library, you have had the pleasure of hearing her talk about the science behind all of this baking, and I don't even want to begin to try to explain it, so I won't, but this is something that she explains very well, how the science works with this. So it says the dough should be combined but crumbly. Okay, what do you think? Combined but crumbly. I think I need a little more work with it. And then it says to form dough into a ball and press it into a thick disc and wrap the disc in plastic wrap and chill in the refrigerator for 2 hours. So that is one bit of time that was not included on in your timeline at the beginning of the recipe. Okay, so we are nice and combined now. Look at that. It all came together so lovely. Okay, this is actually a nice feeling dough. Okay, so we're going to form it into a ball first. A lumpy ball at that. And then we're going to press it into a thick disc. You can see it's a nice big thick disc. And I'm going to come grab my plastic wrap. We don't want to waste any of it. Some of it fell off into the bowl. We're going to lay it in there and we're going to wrap it in our plastic wrap, nice and tight. And we're going to put it in the refrigerator. Alrighty, everybody, so it is now Wednesday morning. My pie crust or my pastry dough has been sitting in my refrigerator all evening. So I got up this morning and thought I'm gonna make these up right away. Who knows? I may be eating an apple dumpling for breakfast this morning. Maybe not. We'll see. So we're gonna get right to part 2 of this recipe, which will be actually rolling out the pastry dough, getting the apples ready and popping this in the oven, and we're going to be following the recipe that we found on A to Z World Food. I'm going to follow it to the letter, so we're going to test it out and see just how good this recipe for apple dumplings really is. All right, everyone, so I have my flat round here of my dough that, according to the recipe, we needed to make it into a ball, make it into a flat round, wrap it in plastic, and refrigerate it for at least 2 hours. And like I just said, I did mine overnight. So it's really, really stiff right now, really, really cold. So we're gonna take off the plastic wrap. And the recipe says to put it on a floured surface, and with a floured rolling pin, we're going to roll the disc out into an even sheet that is 1/8 of an inch thick. So my towel here, I just have just a simple cloth towel here. I actually got this cloth from, I mentioned before in the video, our pie crust classes, Just a Crust classes with Teresa Stryker. And this was part of our class fees, which were very minimal. I can't remember how much we had to pay to make 2 great pie crusts, to get all of her wonderful knowledge and some supplies as well. But this towel was part of our class supplies, and it just makes rolling things out very nicely. So I have lightly rolled that and lightly floured that, excuse me. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of flour on my dough. I know from her classes that we don't wanna flour things too much because it'll make our dough tough, I believe. So we wanna make sure that we're not getting it too tough. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of flour here on my rolling pin as well, which probably put way more flour on my dough than I needed. But I'm just going to slowly start to work this out. And it is rather cold and rather not very easy to roll out right now, so this could take a while. In the meantime, while I'm rolling this out, I'm going to let everyone know, and I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on this, that we won't always be doing sweets for our what we're going to be making off of the A to Z World Food. If you saw my tutorial on how to access the web page a couple days ago, I believe I posted it on November the 9th. So if you've had a chance to take a look at that, you definitely will see that there are desserts and there are appetizers, there are salads, there's just a little bit of everything. Breads, vegetables, side dishes. There's a nice variety of each kind of food, maybe food categories on there. And so I'm gonna try to pick something that's a nice variety. I won't ever make a full meal from each place because that's a lot, and I don't think anybody really wants to watch me cook a full meal, including my own family. So we can see that we're getting somewhere now that this is starting to loosen up a little bit. It is still rather cold, so I may let it sit for a moment, and I may let it sit for a couple minutes and warm up just a tad bit, and I will be right back. Okay, everybody, so it's been sitting for a couple minutes, and I just tested it, flipped it a little bit, and I think it is much softer and it's gonna roll out much faster. So I'm going to continue to roll this out. Now, I know we wanna get it as close to a square probably as we possibly can, because we're going to cut this into 4 equal portions. So obviously I do not have much of a square going on up here, and it's a little bit thicker up here in this corner. So I'm going to, there's mess up number 1. I made it all the way to step 6 in the recipe without flubbing something up. So those of you who are taking bets, number 6 is where I started. So I'm gonna try to just kind of piece some of this together a little bit. And it does say about 1/8 of an inch thick. And so, you know, if you have something to measure with, a ruler or something in your kitchen, it might be nice to have that around. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it, and then I'm probably gonna play with each of these pieces as we go. So just know this is probably not the way to do it. So to cut it in 4 equal parts, I'm just gonna use my pizza cutter because I think that's gonna be the easiest way to slice right through it. And I know that that is not even by any way, shape, or form, but it is what it is. So our crust is done now, the pastry, and I'll have to play with this and fiddle with it as we get ready to assemble everything. But for now, I'm going to set our pastry aside. and I'm going to prepare our apples. Now, our the recipe calls for, the next step is step 7 just simply says filling. So step 8 says to preheat my oven to 350 and to butter a large deep baking dish. So I'm going to grab my butter and my baking dish, and we're going to do that right now. So what I did was I left my butter out. I had a stick of butter to make the pastry, and it only called for 7 tablespoons, if you remember right, in our pastry dough. So I just have a nice, it's a deep dish, okay? I'm assuming we could probably use, just use a pie plate maybe for this as well. Just needs to be deeper. It can't just be like a baking sheet or a baking pan. I'm just going to use my fingers because why not? And I'm just going to butter this nicely. And while I'm buttering this, I'm going to just talk about the apples that I bought really quick. So I promised we're going to be able to do everything with easy to find, ready, available products. And so I went to my local grocery store, and they have Granny Smith apples, which is what we want to use in this recipe. But their Granny Smith apples were humongous. Check out the size of this apple. It's so big and so beautiful. The recipe calls for small apples, but obviously my grocery store does not have small apples. So we're gonna make these huge, and we're gonna see how that works out. So I'm just wiping the butter off my hands now, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna mix together the ingredients for the filling. So our filling calls for a 1/2 cup of sugar, just regular granulated sugar. My sugar looks like brown sugar. I like to use, I prefer to use a pure cane sugar when I'm baking and cooking. It's just my personal preference, but you certainly don't have to do that by any means. It also calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to set that right there, and we're going to get out some measuring spoons, and I have a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon that I'm going to put in there, and then also a 1/4 teaspoon salt. And I'm just going to take a small spoon, and I'm just going to stir that together and combine that nicely. Now that seems like a lot of sugar to me, but I know with an apple dumpling you want that sugar to really cook down. It's going to make a really nice sauce, so that's why there's so much sugar in it. So I'm going to set that aside for now, and we're going to go back to our apples. Okay, so it says that we are going to core and peel our apples. Okay, so I showed you this giant one that hasn't had anything done to it yet, and so I have 3 of these already done. I've taken all the peel off the outside and I've cored them. So just real simple, I'm going to do this while we're talking here. I'm just simply going to use a nice sharp paring knife.
I realize all you Boy Scouts out there that we're not supposed to be cutting toward ourselves, and so I'm probably not being a very good example, but this is how I learned how to peel an apple, and this I believe is my safest way to do it. If you are a young child, you're going to want your mom or grandma or dad or whoever's cooking with you to do this. Or you could use a vegetable peeler, like a carrot peeler or potato peeler, to take the skin off too. Normally when I bake, I like to leave the skin on something, but we're following this recipe to the letter, and we're going to do it the way it says to see how it turns out. So I've got my peel off now, and then I don't have a corer here in my house, so usually I just use a melon baller, and I will just scoop out the core that way and discard that. And I didn't go all the way through the apples. It doesn't say to go all the way through the apple, all the way to the bottom. I just know we want to get out all of the seeds, and my hands are getting slippery here, so I'm going to wipe them off. And so I'm just going to go down until I kind of sense that we're close to the bottom. I think when it's got a nice little bit on the bottom, keeps the juices from all running out the bottom of the apple. I could be wrong on that point. We'll see when I get ready to eat one if I was wrong, but I just left the bottom intact. You can actually eat that little stem part. Doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt a thing. So, so there is my cored and peeled Granny Smith apple. So it says to divide, let's see here. We're going to mix together the sugar, cinnamon, salt, divide it into 4 parts, and sprinkle it into the apples. So I think I was probably right to do it that way. So I'm going to try to divide this as evenly as I can. I'm going to use a tablespoon here, and I'm actually going to get rid of my pastry for a moment while I do this. This is why this is just rogue entertainment this morning for you all. So this is actually how I cook normally, in case you're wondering. So I have my filling here, my sugar, cinnamon, salt that we've mixed up nicely together, and I'm going to hold it over the dish, and I'm going to try to divide this up as evenly as I can. I'm going to put a tablespoon in each apple first, and then we'll go back and divide it up a little bit more. So hopefully, as we go through each of these recipes and each of these countries that we're going to visit, hopefully you'll find that this site can be a really fun resource for when you're in a rut with cooking and you're just kind of stuck for an idea for something to make. Maybe you're going to have a themed party someday when we're allowed to have parties again, and maybe you'll want to have some sort of a fiesta, and you want some authentic Mexican cuisine. So you're gonna go to A to Z World Food and take a look and see what you can find that's authentic Mexican cuisine. Or maybe you are going to be traveling in the future and you know that you want to see what kind of food they're eating in a country. Maybe you don't even want to use the recipe book. Maybe you just want to see what you might be eating and what to expect. That's another way to use this as well. So I'm going to wipe off my countertop a little bit. I did spill a little bit of sugar on it, and I know I don't want that on the outside of my pastry. So we'll clean that mess up. And I'm going to take one piece of my pastry dough, 1/4 of it. Let's find the nicest looking quarter. And I'm going to try to fix this just a little bit so that I know it'll fit around this giant apple. I'm going to roll it out a little bit more. Adjust my camera here so you can see what I'm doing again. Okay, so I'm going to roll this out just a little bit more, and let's see if one of our apples is going to sit in there, if it'll wrap around it. That's really our goal, is to get the pastry to wrap all the way around the apple. I think it needs to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to keep fiddling with it here. And I'm going to try to seal up the cracks as much as I can as we go. You don't want all those cracks in your pastry dough. So let's try this again. We're going to set it in the middle. It says wrap the pastry over the apple and seal it with a twist on top. But I actually forgot a step when I was doing the sugar inside of all the apples. I forgot to put a piece of butter on the top of each. So it just says a small piece of butter, but my recipe says that we need 2 tablespoons of butter plus extra for greasing the pan. So we know that we need a 1/2 tablespoon for each one of our apples. So I'm going to take my butter here, and I'm going to simply use my knife to get my tablespoons cut off. And then I'm going to divide this in half. I've already buttered my dish with my leftover from yesterday, so half. And again, Boy Scouts, I'm so sorry. I just cut toward my finger. And I'm going to just put a half a tablespoon of butter just on the top of each one of those, and that's just going to melt down in as it cooks, as it bakes, and help to make that wonderful, delicious sauce. And so we'll do this with the other 2. I'm just going to put that 1/2 tablespoon right on top. I'm waiting on one of these apples to tip and just spill sugar cinnamon all over my countertop. Hasn't happened yet, but I can see it happening. So we have our apple here with our butter on top, and I'm going to just try to finagle this and see if I can get it to wrap all the way up and all the way around, and look, it's gonna do it. I'm gonna try to pick it up so you can see it a little bit better. It's in the corner of my screen. So we're just gonna kind of pull all this up and try to cover the whole apple with the pastry, and look, that is not a fail. It's not very pretty, but it's not a fail. And so I'm just kind of pinch things around and try to pinch my dough just to get it to seal up nicely. Now my recipe said, again, to wrap the pastry over the apple and seal it with a twist on the top. So, you know, this is not pretty. And there is no twist, but it is completely sealed up in there. And I'm just going to set it in my greased baking dish. So I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to do this with the other 3 because you don't want to watch me do it with all 4 of them, and I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, so I'm back. I have 3 of them done and in the greased pan. And I just wanted to point out here, I had the 4th one done, but when I went to put it in the pan, I noticed that, you know, I do have some spaces here where the apple is showing. So, you know, just gently work your dough and try to seal it. Pinch it off just a little bit. And then my bottom tended, where my core was, tended to kind of be exposed there too. So we want no exposed apple on the bottoms. So I'm gonna check. Yeah, see, there's a little bit too. No exposed bottoms. That's a rule for just life in general. So gonna just make sure all those are sealed up. And since that's got butter on it, it probably won't seal properly, but that's okay. This is rogue cooking here at its best. So we wrapped the pastry and sealed it with a twist, and it says lightly prick the pastry with a fork to allow steam to escape. Okay, so I have a fork here, and I'm going to lightly prick the pastry with a fork. So just a couple spaces, I'm assuming. Doesn't say how much. Just going to do a couple spaces on the top. And then it says place them in the buttered dish and bake for 30 minutes at 350. If you remember, our oven's been preheating to 350. So let's take this over to my oven and get it going. And of course, my oven rack is not in the right position. So we're gonna stick these in the oven. I'm gonna switch my oven rack around. We're gonna put these in the oven, and we will be back in a little bit to see how they turn out. Okay, so while we're waiting on our apple dumplings to finish up in the oven, I just wanted to say that I think that would have been a whole lot easier if the apples would have been smaller Granny Smith, like the recipe called for, instead of those great big ones. I really had to roll the dough out quite a bit more to get it to wrap around, and then I think that's what caused that little bit of exposed bottom. So I think if you can find some small-ish Granny Smith apples, that would be a good idea. And I probably could have taken my very large Granny Smith apples and cut them in half, and then taken the core out and then use that little divot to put the sugar and cinnamon and butter in. But I think that would have made a really big mess. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully the pastry won't cook too fast. I've got my timer set for 30 minutes, and we'll be right back as soon as we pull them out. So we are halfway through the baking process. We're coming up here on 15 minutes, and I thought it might be fun to just kind of sneak a little peek, see what we've got. Excuse my oven mess. So there we go. They're looking good. 15 minutes to go. Everyone, so my timer just went off. You can see it says end. So this is our moment of truth. If I had an extra set of hands, I would do a drum roll, but I don't have an extra set of hands. So I'm gonna pull these out. Let's see what they're looking like. Not the best looking apple dumplings I've ever seen. So I think I'm gonna leave them in for another 5 minutes. I know we're trying to follow the recipe to the T, but I'm gonna add 5 more minutes and see what that does. I want them to brown up just a little bit more, and the pastry's not brown on the top, so we'll be back in. Okay, everyone, so we're on our last few seconds on our extra 5 minutes that we put our apple dumplings in, and there's the sound I've been waiting for at least 5 minutes. So let's take a look here. Let's pull them out. Oh, they're browning up a little bit. I know it's hard to see with the glare from my oven light, but we're going to put these up here, and
We're going to let them cool off just a little bit. We're going to serve them warm. And I grabbed some vanilla ice cream this morning because the recipe says to serve them warm with some vanilla ice cream. So we'll be back in just a few more minutes. We're going to let them cool and we will do a little taste test. Alrighty, so we're going to get on with the moment of truth here. We're going to take one of these bad boys and we're going to dish it up. This is like my breakfast and my lunch, probably. And the recipe says to serve it warm with ice cream. You can see I got a little bit of butter on my paper. Serve warm with ice cream if desired. It is desired. So get a scoop of ice cream on here too. That wasn't quite a whole scoop. And spoon, fork, knife. Definitely need some silverware here. We're gonna cut into it and we're gonna see what the inside looks like. Okay, so our apple definitely probably needed a couple more minutes, but you can see when I cut it into it, all that lovely butter and sugar mixture has started to melt in. Oh, yum. There's the money. There's the good stuff. So let's see. Let's get a little bit of everything in this bite if we can. Not claim to be a chef, and apparently I can't eat with one hand either. So there's my apple piece, and there's my pastry. I've got some of that nice sauce and a little bit of ice cream on there. Oh, that is good. So good. I definitely think if you have apples this big, definitely bake them a couple more minutes. I don't mind a little bit of undercooked apple. I like a fruit dessert. It's got a little substance to it, a little bit of bite to it. But the pastry is delicious. The filling is great. And I'd say this one is a win. So go Team USA for the apple dumpling recipe. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you'll tune in again next Wednesday and follow me along as I make next week's masterpiece. And until then, we'll see ya.